Today's story is titled The Mountain That Eats Men by Zealous Idle Dog 9656. The link to the story is in the description below. Please enjoy.
I stood at its entrance. A knot of barbed wire formed in my throat. I desperately tried to make my cigarette last longer, but it was of no use. I dropped the butt, but only when the burning sensation in my fingers became too great to bear. This mine gets its nickname for a good reason. My feet carried me forward into its dark mouth, lit by the cheapest of oil lamps and maintained by only the workers who had become too sick to continue mining. It didn't take long for the heat to consume me. Bolivia is a hot country in the summer, so adding miles of the Earth's insulation was no plan drawn up by a loving God. However, there was no other way. This corner of the Earth runs on silver, and employment is the only thing keeping the wolves at bay. It had taken me an hour to walk to the top of the mountain and where the mine's entrance lay, and it took nearly as long to descend to the mine's deepest layers. As I descended, I saw men praying to idols of a god of the mine. He is said to bring safety to those who worship it and leave offerings of cigarettes and whiskey. I do not believe in idols. The noise of metal hitting stone reverberated around the walls, and conversation populated the bleak stone tomb. Even in such a place, laughter can be heard. Sweat dripped from my forehead and fell to the dusty floor. The air was soupy, and a faint tickle had formed in my throat. Soon, I was on my hands and knees, desperately trying not to scrape my elbows against the unforgiving walls. When I reached a dead end, I began my work. Using a small tool similar to a pickaxe but smaller, I began chipping away. At these depths, the heat and pressure make the silver shine like the sun reflecting of water. I've seen it with my own eyes. The thought of finding even a small vein of the moonlight metal filled me with energy. The thought of dropping a bag of the metal in front of the foreman and coming home with enough food to feed my family for weeks would make the effort worth it. Soon, the walls began narrowing as my greed to continue advancing overpowered my sense to dig the walls wider. As a result, the effort I'd made not to scrape my elbows became futile. In a careless motion, I'd pulled my left arm upward and lost a good deal of skin to the cave walls. I seethed in pain, being unable to move as doing so would result in another collision with the walls. It stung like hell, and in combination with the heat, I began to feel ill. I stopped to breathe. I'd been in this armpit for hours. I could break now. So I carefully pushed myself out, feet first, being mindful of my now bleeding elbow. When I finally stood, it felt like a luxury beyond comparison. However, this luxury was broken in an instant by the bone-chilling revelation that I was alone in the center corridor. The sounds of talking and mining were gone. This is the only time I've heard silence in a mine, and I desperately wanted it to be gone. I wished for more than anything to hear someone speak or shout or anything, but no noise was made. I walked through the abandoned structure, searching for anyone. Minutes spent desperately searching for life, and nothing. I panicked. The stinging in my elbow long since forgotten, I ran to the exit. I coughed as running was such an unnatural sensation to me, especially down here. When I reached the wooden ladder, I climbed it desperately. The heat made me dizzy, but I pressed on. I was 4 rungs from the top when something grabbed my ankle and pulled hard. Its hand was cold. The fall felt endless. I saw everything in fantastic detail as I fell. The grooves in the earth, the poorly constructed ladder. I blacked out the moment I hit the floor. The only sensation I felt was a slight pain in my elbow and the cool feeling around my ankle. When I awoke, I felt sticky all over. A combination of sweat and blood covered me, and I felt nauseous, but more pressingly, I couldn't see. Had the fall knocked me blind? I could move, but I couldn't see the limbs that were moving. I stood in a daze, and I collapsed as soon as I did. I clattered against a wall I couldn't comprehend, because my whole world had gone the color of the night sky. I sat perfectly still, panicking, shaking, crying. I called out, but I received no answer. I could feel drops of blood flowing from my head. I desperately wanted to wake from this nightmare. I groped all around me, trying to understand where I was, until my hand touched glass. I was taken aback by this, so I tried to figure out its shape. It felt smooth and flared at the base. It was an oil lamp, but it wasn't burning hot. The oil lamps had gone out. With no one refilling them, they'd used their fuel, and one by one, had abandoned me to my peril. In a way, this gave me hope. I wasn't blind, but rather in a darkness so impenetrable that I couldn't tell the difference. As I groped around, desperately trying to find the ladder, I remember why I'd fallen. Something had grabbed me, and its hands were cold. I remembered how it had shocked me to feel such a chill in a sweatbox like this. I grew more frantic, desperately trying to find the ladder. The pool of blood and dirt that I'd lain in now covered my hands, and I felt around. After an eternity, I finally felt what seemed like the 2 sides of the ladder. They were thin and straight, though they were not textured like wood, and there were no rungs between them. I stood to my feet, facing what was in front of me. Its breath smelled like stale cigarettes and dried whiskey.